All right, guys, here's another announcement for UFC 300. Holly Holm. Holly will be taking on the only person in U.S. history to win back-to-back Olympic gold medals in judo. The UFC has officially signed Kayla Harrison. Kayla's 16-1 with 12 finishes. Her takedowns, her ground and pound are nasty, and this will be the first time she will be competing at bantamweight.
Probably the biggest shock announcement of UFC 300 so far, and it is Kayla Harrison signing with the UFC and coming away from PFL. Clearly, she wanted to come over to the UFC and really cement herself as one of the best fighters in the world. But one of the craziest things about this is it's at 135.
I mean, I do think it's great. You need a shot in the arm really badly for 135. The question is how is she even going to make that weight? She's made 145. She fought for LFA a couple years ago. That was the one where I can't even remember who she fought, but she just massacred the poor girl. There's literally footage of her going like afterwards where she was like, whoa, that was even a bit much for me. But yeah, she struggled to get down to 145. She looked okay. You know, she didn't look like super gaunt or anything like that. But an extra 10 pounds? We saw what happened to Chris Cyborg trying to go down to 140. I mean, this is somebody who was on average 20 pounds heavier than the 135. You know, like Ronda Rousey, obviously there's a lot of parallels with their judo backgrounds. She was on average 20 pounds heavier in her entire career. That's a tough one, man.
Well, the crazy thing as well is, like, when is UFC 300? April.
Yeah.
April 13th.
She fought in November, and she weighed 150. And now she's hoping to drop down to 135. When we do look at fighters that have dropped down from 155 to 135, who have we got there?
Frankie.
We got Frankie Edgar, obviously notoriously, but you could argue as well that Frankie was undersized for 155 as well. Similar guys to, like, you know, BJ Penn, is that that was the smallest weight class that they had in the UFC. So either you go and fight in the WEC or you fight in the UFC at a higher weight.
There's been some other guys like Sun Sao, you know, he fought at 155 at the start of his career, beat Jorge Masvidal at 55, you know, and then eventually became a 135er, but like he's a small guy. Like I think maybe George Roop was a similar situation.
Oh man,
there's a few other guys who have kind of done that. I mean, I think Faber fought a lightweight at one point as well, you know.
And it's over a long period of your career as well. It's not like Frankie just went from 155-pound champion. It's like, right, I'm going to drop down to 135. This was a slow progression to
several
that point.
Years.
Yeah, several years to get to that point, to get his body conditioned to make that weight. But what you're looking at is a solid 155er in Kayla Harrison.
She's got a lot of muscle.
A lot of muscle.
She's jacked.
So that's the question, right? Like, surely one of the best ways for her to cut that weight is to drain that muscle as well. Take that muscle down. And will that severely affect her against someone like Holly Holm? It's interesting as well that they've just decided to offer Holly up. I would say sort of sacrificial lamb. Again, it's almost like replaying the Ronda...
Well, to me,
the Ronda Holly fight again.
Well, they've been on such fumes with Holly since that. Like, Jack Slack, I think, put this on Twitter, and honestly, I couldn't answer the question. He was like, name 5 of Holly Holm's best fights. Most of the good ones I can think of are her losses.
Yeah.
Like Miesha Tate getting that last-second RNC.
Betchkahea.
Yeah, that was the only other one, and it's Betchkahea.
Yeah.
It's not fighting any of the champions that she went up against.
Her entire career just been living off of 193, which is crazy.
I don't know, because
I mean, she lost to Shevchenko, lost to Nunes.
But like Holly Holm is like one of the most decorated women in combat sports ever. Like,
True.
I don't really care if she wins or loses. She has an incredible legacy that very, very few women...
You do care if she wins or loses. You care how the fight goes. You care about all those things. Like when she fought Rocky Pennington underneath Conor McGregor and Donald Cerrone, the crowd was booing like crazy.
Yeah, but
everybody cares.
I just mean in the context of her career. It's like, this is why I don't think it's that dissimilar, because to me, she is like a Robbie Lawler of that division. You know, and they gave Ben Askren Robbie Lawler when he first got to the UFC, a veteran of the division.
That's a stretch, my guy.
That is a massive stretch.
Yeah.
Why?
Name 5 of her top performances.
I don't see how that has anything to do with...
Why do you love Robbie Lawler so much?
Well, I don't...
Because he has so many.
I don't think...
You could name top 5 really easily.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I still don't really... I still feel like them giving...
Every title fight that guy was in.
But that doesn't really have any...
The difference here as well is that they offered Ben Askren up to Robbie for Robbie to decimate him. They threw Ben into a fight that they thought Robbie was going to fucking kill him. Whereas what they're doing with Kayla, they're setting her up beautifully with a woman who is the most decorated combat female of all time, or whatever you want to call her. And she's an overwhelming underdog against Kayla, because you would imagine that Kayla's just going to go in there, take her the fuck down.
Have you seen the odds?
Yeah, they're incredibly in Kayla's favor.
Like minus 330.
But the point is, I don't think it's that dissimilar for me in that regard. Like the champions from another organization is coming over. They're giving them a veteran UFC staple that win or lose will be like fine for them.
For her entire UFC run, I feel like the UFC consistently put Holly back into these fights so that she could desperately recreate what she did to Ronda.
Yeah.
But it was just, she was the right person at the right time to come and expose Ronda's striking.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to it than that, in that you had an athlete that was so veteran and could execute a game plan, and you put them with Greg Jackson, who is going to come up with a great game plan for Ronda, and then you have someone in Holly Holm who can stay composed and calm enough to execute the strategy properly, and that's what she did.
There was
loads of other girls were not able to do that against Ronda. You know,
there was loads of things going into that fight as well. Ronda had that was her third fight of the year. She was
doing the films and stuff.
Doing the films, and also like, everyone on the fucking planet were giving her this like full sense of security in her striking as well. People were saying that she could beat fucking Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah,
but she was put on the front cover of like Ring magazine.
You know, I don't want to sound too disparaging here. Holly Holm is an absolute legend, what she's done. Like you said, she's one of the most decorated athletes in, you know, not just MMA, kickboxing, boxing, several sport world champion. But, you know, the thing is, that was literally 2015. We're in 2024. Guys, that 1 year, that's 10 years since that is crazy. And it does show. It's kind of a marker, an indication of where the division is right now. As if you didn't see it in the last title fight. It is a massive indication of this is who we're going to test. One of the most decorated athletes to never fight in the UFC that people have been hyped about joining for a long time. I mean, if you are to say anybody at 135 that has star power, maybe Misha.
It's just coupled that with a 135-pound debut. That must be a mistake.
Well, no, it just shows us that they do not care about featherweight, and it's not going to come back.
But that's not the point, though. Is that how is she physically going to do it?
Well, it's also strange because we know Holly can make 145, and she's fought for the belt at 145.
Honestly,
so why
I
not?
think it's going to get to a point
and
where
we have no 145 champion. If you want a champion, Kayla Harrison's right there. Like you can fucking throw a belt on her.
But that's the thing, right? It's like, I think we're going to build up to UFC 300, and it's just we're gonna forget that it's 135, and all of a sudden it will be 145. As well.
I mean, why don't they just make it for the vacant 145 women's title? It's not like there's other people waiting to fight for it, but they're probably not, because they probably leave in that division alone, right?
I don't know. It's always like Dana has this weird thing against catch fights these days. Catchweight fights, I should say. I don't know why it just doesn't do that, you know? Let's try that experiment. I mean, it worked out horribly for Cyborg, but at least give her a stepping stone. Give her, you know, who knows? This might have been her idea. We might find out in the next couple days that she was ready to go down to 135. She knew 145 was dead and she wants to be champion. That's it. Nothing else. But it doesn't really, it defies logic. And the thing that would make a ton of sense is to just do a catchweight fight, which Dana has, for some reason, thrown out in the last couple of years.
I mean, maybe Holly didn't want to take a fight with Kayla Harrison at 145.
Maybe.
She said, no, that's not going to happen. If you want me to fight her, it's only going to happen at 135. Yeah. But if it's not Misha, then
Misha, or I don't know, does she need a win to get to the belt? I feel like you could just throw her in the state of the division. You could just give her a title shot.
Realistically, yeah, you definitely could.
Yeah, like what is the point of her coming into the 135 pounds division? Is it literally just the legacy of the belt?
I think it's because they're not doing 145 anymore, dude.
I think that's what it is, yeah.
They're just like, nah, we're done.
Yeah.
I think if there's any way of saying it without saying it in a screeching red light blinking way, this is them saying this division is done.
So we're going to make fighters who weigh in at 155 put their lives in danger to make a weight class that is only still just sort of like swimming in shallow waters. It's so shallow.
Let me ask you about this.
great
Like,
TV.
It's
did
terrifying.
Great
It's
TV.
so bad for the fighters.
Let me ask you this. Did they even want to make 145 in the first place? They had Chris Cyborg come over and they didn't let her fight at 145. They wanted to make a fight at 135.
But she couldn't do it.
I don't think they even wanted to do 145 in the first place.
couldn't
but
do
they
it.
did it. And now, you know, that division's dying. It's like, are we just going to repeat ourselves or be like,
Well, they should
this time?
Honestly, they
they're
should
gonna have to make
they
the weight.
should have retired it when Amanda smacked Cyborg around the head, and that's when they should have
They
retired.
basically did. She only made one more defense after that, I think. So
She had a few.
Spencer did all right as well. Not all right, but she survived.
well, then
yeah.
Spencer was just quit after that. She was like, you know what, this is bullshit. Really, you're not getting me any fights. Like, I'm done. Well, let's assume for a moment that at 155 she doesn't cut any weight. So then 145 doesn't seem that much of a difference. Then it's a question of where do those extra 10 pounds
I mean,
come from?
you're right. If her walk around weight is 155 and she literally just turns up to the scale, jumps on and goes, thanks very much, then, you know, there is a possibility that she can get
Because I feel like Ronda walked around at like 155.
I don't know, dude. She's jacked.
Jacked
She's pretty
as fuck.
big.
Yeah.
And if you see Kayla in real life as well, when she sat around the table with people like Henry Cejudo and like Habib Nurmagomedov and even Justin Gaethje, she's the fucking same size of those guys.
Yeah.
Like, she's the same fucking size as like Habib. Big 155 men. Like, she's ginormous. I just feel like we're going to be in a situation where people are going to forget about the 135 thing. We're going to get to UFC 300 and the fight will be at 145 or a catch weight at 143
But the thing is,
or
like,
something like that.
I just feel like the UFC don't want any part of that.
But it doesn't matter because she physically cannot do it.
I mean, we'll find out, I guess. But
Yeah.
like, I feel like if they were going to do that, they would have just booked it at that. Or they
I
would have
like
booked
to
it for the
think
title.
she's insisted on this, and
Yeah,
it's not
maybe.
the UFC just
Yeah.
being like,
Are you sure?
prove your loyalty
Yeah.
to
Do
this
it.
brand. Yeah, do it.
I just think that the UFC don't want anything to do 145. Otherwise, this would have been made there 100%. Like, there's no reason
agree.
not to. If they were
Yeah.
like, we want to keep the 45 division going, they could easily have put her in
It's
there. For a title
it's such a
shot.
dangerous place for Kayla, like both like physically and her career wise, to accept those terms and say to the UFC, I'm sure this isn't the first time that she's had talks with the UFC of coming in and fighting in the UFC and them putting up their hands and say, look, we are not doing 145, we're not doing 155. The only divisions that we're doing is 135 down. If you can make that, then great. If you can't, then, you know, sorry. So Kayla's, she's got herself in this situation now where she's like, shit, I really want to cement my legacy in the UFC, win that UFC belt. There's a roundtable discussion on Anatomy of a Fighter's page. And it's with, like I said, Henry Cejudo, Justin Gaethje, Habib Nurmagomedov. And they're all discussing who the most accomplished athlete is there. And you have Henry with his gold medal, you have Kayla with her gold medals. And she is actively making the argument to say, I've got 2 Olympic gold medals. But the rest of them are just like, yeah, but you haven't got these. And they were showing off their UFC titles. And I think that's probably plagued her career. It doesn't matter how many millions of dollars that I've won. It doesn't matter how many PFL belts that I've won. I have not got a UFC belt. And now she's in that corner, the kind of tail end of her career where it goes, maybe she comes in, she has 1 or 2 fights against Holm and then the champion, and then she's off into the sunset.
So that's one argument for why she would want to do it. But also, what is the harm? If we've learned anything in the last couple of years, it doesn't matter if fighters are shop worn, as long as they have some sort of name, people will scrounge them up for boxing fights, BKFC, and they'll make a killing off of it. So what is the harm of just doing a featherweight fight? Was the harm, I suppose for Holly, it would be a harm for her to do 155. That'd be too much. But what's the harm in just saying, let's have a feature fight that people would want to see at a weight that they can both comfortably make? What is the actual harm of that? Like, why doesn't... I don't know why. Danny used to do catchweight fights all the time. Like, what's the harm of being able to say, yeah, we can make this fight one time, just like we did for Vitor Belfort and Rich Franklin back in the day at 190 pounds. They used to do this all the time, and it did really well for them. I even think that was a main event. It was a major attraction when they used to do some of these catchweight fights. I mean, you know, Anderson Silva used to go up and not even fight for a title at 205 all the time. There's nothing wrong with a feature fight at a different weight that complements both fighters, or at least, you know, again, creates that stepping stone to get down to 135.
I've just looked up Holly's boxing record, and she's got titles in multiple weight classes. I don't know what women's welterweight is.
Well, MMA and grappling sports are a lot different.
That's true.
In general from kickboxing and boxing.
That's true.
There's less emphasis. I mean, most of that comes from wrestlers. You know, I mean, like, there are wrestlers that have died in high school in the United States from weight cutting. It's such an endemic part of the grappling sports. And don't get me wrong, tons of athletes, like Gervonta Davis has missed weight in boxing. You know, like some of the biggest athletes in those sports have also missed. But it's not as endemic an issue. It's not as profoundly, you know, involved in every aspect of the sport like it is for grappling and MMA, you know. So we're actually reducing the price of our memberships for our Hall of Fame levels, which gets an exclusive live chat and all kinds of extra bonus content.
Your name in a video.
Your name in a video, that does happen. All kinds of stuff. We even give some people that come up with some of the ideas shout outs in the video, so you get mentioned by name. So yeah, if anybody's interested in supporting at a higher level, you're just a fan of the channel, whatever it is, this is a good opportunity because we're reducing the price from $14.99, a massive, massive discount.